Ba-da-ba-ba, ba-da-ba-ba. All right. Promoter 101. 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 Promoter 101.
My name's Tom Windish, and I'm on Promoter 101.
Way out west there was a fella I want to tell you about. Fella by the name of Dan Steinberg. At least, that was the handle his loving parents gave him. But he never had much use for it himself. This promoter, he called himself Steiny. Now, Steiny, that's a name no one would self-apply where I come from. But then there was a lot about Steiny that didn't make a whole lot of sense. And a lot about where he lived, likewise. But then again, maybe that's why I found the place so darn interesting.
Steiny will oblige. Happy holidays, everyone. It's Promoter 101, and for those of you counting at home, it's episode 64. As our narrator said, I'm Dan Steinberg, but you're welcome to call me Steiny. And joining me, as always, is William Lucas Pierce.
Happy to be back. I hope you had a fantastic holiday break and you enjoyed our 12 Days of Christmas on Promoter 101. Some fantastic interviews through there. And we're excited to be back for episode 64, as Dan mentioned. Today we've got Feld Entertainment's Kenneth Feld sitting down with Goldstar's CEO Jim McCarthy from the Aspen Live Conference. Core Software's Scott Aller is going to be joining us about the power of data, and we got a war story from APA's Craig Newman. Plus, Dan and I are going to break down for the first time in 2018 the news of the week.
Shep Gordon on Promoter 101.
We're finishing up our world tour, but you can catch us live one last time.
Absolutely. We are just days away now, Dan. We're going to be heading down to the FlyCon conference in the Big Easy, New Orleans, on January 16th at 2 p.m. Promoter 101 will have our special guest from Locken in the Brooklyn Bowl, Mr. Peter Shapiro. Very excited to be spending some time down in the NO, Dan.
I believe the good people out there in internet land like us to call him Shappy, but yeah, it's going to be a good time to hang out with Pete. If you've got something on your chest or you just want to openly share with someone, this is a safe place. There are no stupid questions. Well, there are. There are lots of stupid questions. But feel free to reach out to us. Send us an email to steiny@promoter101.net. You can reach both of us there, and we promise to respond no matter how stupid the question.
And be sure to keep up with us on Twitter. I'm at W. Luke Pierce. Dan's at The Jew. And the show is Promoters. That's Promoters plural. 101.
Hey, this is Brian O'Connell with Live Nation, and we are on Promoter 101.
If you've missed any of the past podcasts, you can always catch up at promoter101.net. This week we feature a classic reissue of episode 21, featuring Paradigm Talent Agency's Tom Windish, talking about his early days in the business. Also, that episode has Atlantic Records Senior Vice President of Touring and Artist Development, Harlan Fry, sharing his points of view on the industry. If you haven't heard it, it's new to you.
And don't you think it's about time you actually subscribe to Promoter 101? It's not like a cost or anything. It's a totally free service. We're providing it to you, our listeners. So sign up, subscribe wherever you podcast. And please tell some people about this. Drop us a review if you've got a moment. Seriously, reviews help us a great deal. And a note of appreciation or notes or your thoughts on the podcast are always welcome. We'll give you a shout out on the podcast. I'm literally begging you right now.
Hello, it's Kevin Lyman from the Vans Warped Tour, and you're on Promoter 101.
Dan, it's time for the news of the week. This is the first news of the week in 2018, so let's get to it. Let's start it off and talking about Taylor Swift. You know, Dan, are stadium shows expected to sell out on the snap right now? That's the latest debate in the world of live entertainment, and it's producing one of Dave Brooks's first buzzwords of 2018, late selling. There's reports out there claiming that Taylor's Reputation Stadium tour was shaping up to be an absolute disaster. But the flip side that we're hearing from the Messina Touring Group and AEG Stateside is that late selling tickets really are going to translate into an ultimate higher gross for this tour despite the non-immediate sellouts. Taylor, in fact, of course, adding more stadium tour dates earlier this week. So the result, well, it could be a cool $500 million, that's half a bill, gross for this tour. I'm having a hard time parsing through the noise on this one, Dan, and we've got the friend of the pod, David Marcus, out there spinning this late selling idea, and of course, all the haters out there are ready to pounce on Taylor. What side of the story are you sticking with? Is this a late selling thing that's a new phenomenon we're all going to be dealing with as buyers continue to make decisions later, as Mark Geiger noted in his AIBA keynote earlier this year? Or is this, in fact, just a way to spin a stiffing tour?
There's only so many dates Taylor can do in a given album cycle. They've all been selling in the past. They've moved to the stadium level. There's really nothing bigger. So now they're pricing accordingly. With that, the supply and demand, you price higher, things sell slower. But I think by the time these dates play out, they will all sell. She is the gold standard. The tickets are priced accordingly. The gross is going to be insane. It's going to be a high production show. And I truly believe Louis Messina and his team are going to pull off the highest grossing, most successful stadium tour we've seen yet with this. Just because it doesn't sell on the snap doesn't mean it's not going to go. They're just pricing it right, which the industry has a big problem with. And if you talk any of the guys that lead this business, they'll tell you that the secondary constantly gets to pick up all the money because we've done a bad job pricing. And the industry is starting to figure out how to fix that. So there's going to be more availability to shows longer out, but tickets are going to be priced better. I think we're going to see a lot more of this.
Absolutely. Pricing, speed, all these factors of competition are one way to weed out what the ultimate gross of a show is going to be. And I think figuring out what that balance is going to be is partly an artificial function too, Dan. You know, some artists want to adhere to that Grateful Dead mantra of the socialism of music, of easy access and low-cost access to music. But the reality is, like you said, the secondary is scooping up from the top of that a great deal of cash. Probably high time that promoters and artists get paid that.
You know, let's talk about this for a second. One thing that we don't really ever talk about as an industry is the number of tickets the secondary market eats up on that on sale. So when we sell 5,000 tickets in the first 3 seconds, many of those are going to those fucking bots. So we take that out, and Ticketmaster doing a much better job with verified fan and platinum and making sure that scalpers aren't getting it and scrubbing the data. You're losing those ticket sales of the secondary market who are also supporting those numbers. So when you take that out and we just actually have fans buying tickets, we have lower numbers because we've taken a lot of revenue out of the original sales when the secondary is buying those tickets up. That's a factor.
You know, there's an interesting case study out there, and I met Ant from Light at the Aspen Music Conference for the first time, and he's been cited in Dave Brooks' articles. He's been cited in Polestar's follow-up articles to Dave Brooks' articles. It's all over the place, but his design is really to make sure that scalpers are making less money by more affordably pricing those things. And I think having disintermediaries like Light and other functions out there in the marketplace are just one of several levers that we can be pulling to reduce and mitigate the role of scalpers in ticket selling and live events. So I hope that this idea of late selling and higher grosses really is something that does come to fruition. It's going to require us to change the way that we think about marketing and the way that we perhaps put tours up, the way that we price tickets. A bunch of different things are going to have to change for all of this to become true. But it's an interesting concept. It certainly could be proven to be a lucrative one and something that we should pay attention to throughout this year.
You know, I got to say, I think Ant might be the most impressive person I've met at Aspen Live this year. I liked him a lot.
Yes, and for those of you that are tuning in to the podcast and don't know what we're talking about Anthony Taylor, who is the CEO of Light. That's Lyte. You should check out their service. His platform is basically out there undercutting the secondary market. Basically a fan-friendly ticket exchange that allows fans the chance to resell and purchase tickets to sold-out shows without being gouged on that price or concerned with phony tickets. So it's going to help fans attend sold-out shows and help venues and promoters fill the room and allow for the proper exchange of data, too, which Ant talked at length about. But that guy was fucking impressive. He was awesome.
I got to say, I didn't know him going in. I randomly got seated next to him at a dinner the night before Aspen started. And by the time the conference was over, I felt like I had a new, really good friend. I really think the world of him. We got to have him on the podcast. It's a given, right?
He'd be a great interview. He'd bring a great perspective, and this would be a great follow-up to what we're talking about here today.
Let's jump into some other things. Now, it's festival season. At least it's time to announce the festivals. We've got Coachella announcing weekend 1 and 2 in India. We've got an amazing lineup there with Beyonce, Eminem, The Weeknd, Tyler, the Creator. You got Governor's Ball in New York that announced the next day, who also has a great lineup. Boston Calling also announcing. You're seeing the Jack Whites and the M&Ms popping up in a lot of those lineups. Very similar across the board, but day 1, 2, 3, you got Coachella, then you had Governor's Ball, then you had Boston Calling. I gotta say, I think Boston Calling's got the best lineup of all of them, but Polestar is reporting that Coachella will be the highest grossing festival of 2018 already.
It's just a bold call, accurately predictable. It's the highest price ticket. It's the largest capacity for it. Of course, you could make that call right now. And you could sit here on this podcast and debate the merits of lack of headliners, lack of understanding of headliners, or similarity of headliners across festivals, as Lefsitz wrote about it in his letter this week. But the reality is Coachella is always going to be that spring break time mainstay festival and probably lead the pack in terms of the rest of announcements. But if you're looking for deeper, more diversified lineups for things, Trevor Solomon's buys at Boston Calling are a great variation for things. I've been really impressed with Governor's Ball. I've been really impressed with Kaboo's lineup and what Roger LeBlanc has done down in Kaboo as well, too. So seeing a lot of similarities between the big name events like Governor's Ball, I'm sure Bonnaroo, I'm sure throwing Outside Lands and throwing Coachella in there. It's pretty homogenous in terms of what we're seeing in terms of headliners and acts with buzz. So I think you just need to find whatever experience you enjoy and go to that festival and be less concerned about the headliners.
Yeah, I'm sure Bottle Rock and Lock-In and also Sasquatch should be announcing just around the corner as well.
Looking forward to all those things. Hope there's a little bit of variation.
Or the continuation of the M&M tour.
Yeah. Speaking of grosses, Dan, our buddy Dave Brooks is reporting that Guns N' Roses will have the 4th biggest tour ever and counting. That's Guns N' Roses' Not in This Lifetime tour, which grossed more than $475 million in 2017. That's the 4th highest grossing tour of all time based on Billboard's box score. It's only outranked by Coldplay's A Head Full of Dreams, Rolling Stones' A Bigger Bang, and U2's 360 Stadium Tour. So they had 123 headlining dates, playing to more than 4.3 million fans across 5 continents. And they're getting ready to resume a European leg starting in Berlin, June 3rd, 2018. So this thing's not done yet, Dan.
You got to give it up for Ken Vermeglish and Steve Herman for putting together an amazing grossing high dollar tour. Award season is upon us. The Golden Globes will be this weekend. In just a few weeks, the Grammys will be in New York for the first time in decades. Hits is reporting that the first wave of Grammy performances, Childish Gambino, Lady Gaga, Little Big Town, Pink. Some amazing stuff there, Luke.
Yeah, also they're reporting some early notes, some nods to Broadway, including Patti LuPone reprising a role from Don't Cry For Me, Argentina, and Dear Evan Hansen's Ben Platt. Going to come out to join her for a special Bernstein number, so pretty diverse 5 or 6 acts they've announced here. Of course, excited to see that night in Madison Square Garden. Excited to see the Grammys back in New York. I think it'll be a different taste. Dan, a trio of news points this week from Spotify. First, good news. Spotify announced in an emoji-filled tweet this week that they passed 70 million paid subscribers. Second point, in bad news, Spotify was hit with a $1.6 billion lawsuit from Wixen, which is the publisher who represents catalogs of Tom Petty, Neil Diamond, The Doors, for the illegal and unapproved licensing of some songs from those catalogs. So a little bit of a risk there. And the third piece of news that will file under We'll See, Spotify file IPO docs with the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission, at the end of December, prepping the way for that direct listing we talked about months ago on the podcast. It's going to be an exciting year for streaming, an exciting year for Spotify. A lot of these things are going to unfold. And the second point we talked about of the lawsuit certainly is going to impact the risk assessment that investors are going to need to make when possibly buying into the stock. So we'll see how this shakes out.
You got to love when we're talking about IPOs, initial public offerings on the podcast. We've gone Wall Street here at Promoter 101.
We certainly have, Dan. Let's talk about the conference season, Dan. You know, we came out of Aspen Live Music Conference, but we're coming up on Nylon Connect. We're coming up on APAP. We're coming up on Polestar. A lot of shit going on in the next couple months.
There's so many conferences now. You're hearing rumors of weak sales at a bunch of the big conferences. And a lot of that is supposedly because of the huge warring back and forth between the Live Nations and AEGs and Oakview Group stuff. So you're hearing that maybe they're not supporting each other's events, and that's creating less interest because everybody's not going to be in the same rooms at once. But my guess is everybody will be at the bars hanging out, even if they're not registering. That's what we're counting on, because I'm still going to go to a bunch of them.
That's a great point that you bring up there, Dan. I wonder what percentage of attendees are represented just by AEG and Live Nation between all the local buyers and marketing folks and executives that attended from those two companies. I mean, that's a pretty sizable chunk of attendees, I'd imagine, going to those things. If you cut one of them out of one particular conference for whatever reason, for whatever grievance a parent company might have towards the owner of a particular conference, then, well, it might have an impact.
A lot of it has to do with the content, too, and some of the content is being done very much in someone's personal ego instead of a board. So some of that stuff's not super exciting to sit through, and some of those panels have been rehashed a million times.
Dan, why don't we end it here with a quick congrats in the label world to Ron Perry, who was officially named the head of Columbia Records after months and months of speculation. He was rumored to be the head over there. He's going to take over that New York-based position, replacing Rob Stringer, who was bumped up to CEO of Sony Music. And rumor has it that L.A. Reid, this is according to Music Business Worldwide, has raised $75 million in private equity funding for a new label venture. He's signed office space in Beverly Hills, and he's hiring executive talent soon. This is all rumor and speculation. It's not confirmed by anybody. Just a source close to L.A. Reid was named in this particular Music Business Worldwide report. So we'll see what the LaFace and former Epic Records chairman has to offer in 2018.
This is a quick note from the editor. As much as we welcome any and all of your feedback, I just want to remind you, our listeners, this is a labor of love. We don't charge you in any way for this podcast. We don't allow advertising, and we try to cater to as many different people all at the same time. Please keep in mind, when you send us your thoughts, that this is our love letter to the music industry. We are trying hard to be fair, to educate, and to entertain without pissing off anybody at the same time. It's a tall order. I know sometimes we miss the mark, but we're doing our best. If there's something you'd like us to address, please try and keep that in mind. Thanks so much for listening.
This is Andrea Johnson from ICM Partners, and you're listening to Promoter 101.
And Dan, the Promoter 101 Badass of the Week, that's the first Badass of 2018. We want to take a moment to shine a spotlight on Live Nation's Michael Belkin. Overseeing the great heartland of the Midwest, his family name has been associated with every major concert to play Cleveland for the past 4 decades, with quite possibly the best hair in the business, making him this week's Promoter 101 Badass of the Week. Big congrats goes out to you, Michael. Well deserved.
Hey, this is Mark Geiger from WME, William Morris Endeavor Entertainment, coming to you on Dan Steinberg's podcast.
In our feature interview this week, we've got a special interview with Family Entertainment's biggest name, the CEO of Feld Entertainment, Kenneth Feld. Ken sat down with Jim McCarthy, the CEO of Goldstar, at the Aspen Live Conference this past December.
So many things to talk about, I think, that the backstory of how your father and you and how that came from where it was to where it is today would be a great starting point.
Okay. 2 weeks ago, November 11th, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the, let's say, modern-day Feld Entertainment. And it marked the day that my father bought Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus from the Ringling family at the Coliseum in Rome. But he started in the rock and roll business and then ultimately in the arena business. He had a record store in Washington, D.C., and he also had a record label. And on Sunday mornings, when I was like 4 and 5 years old, he would take me to all the black churches in Washington, and we'd listen to gospel music. And if he liked a group that he heard, he'd go and record them. So one of the first groups was the Pilgrim Travelers with Sam Cooke and Lou Rawls as the lead singers. It just went on from that, and he got in the jazz business. And then he figured people are listening to the records. And the record store he put, to get people in, he had speakers in the windows. And then people came in, and it started as a drugstore, and then all they wanted to hear was the music. So then he figured they wanted to see the act. So he created his circuit, which was Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Richmond, and Norfolk, Virginia. And so he could do 4-day weekends, and he would book the acts. And then he said, well, I've got to expand it. He then started, he would have a fall tour and a spring tour of 81-nighters. And this started about 1955. Bill Haley and the Comets, Chuck Berry, the Platters, all of these early rock and roll acts. And that's what he did. And it encompassed 11 weekends, and they just went all over North America. And it was in the early mid-50s. People were coming back from the Korean War. They were building a lot of these venues and the War Memorial auditoriums that they had in many of the cities. But there was no content. There were 6 NBA teams, 6 NHL teams, nothing to go in the venue. So he had these tours. And then in July of 1956, Ringling Brothers Barnum Bailey went broke. And my father called John Ringling North, and he says, I have this great idea to save the circus. And he was just a promoter, the marketing guy. And he said, you deliver the show where I tell you, and we'll forget about the tents. You always played Madison Square Garden and the Boston Garden anyway. Why don't you just play arenas? And 1957, he started promoting. Lost a lot of money in the first year. 58 got better. Then it kept getting better. But John Ringling North, and my dad had nothing to do with the show. It was just the promotion. John Ringling North decided he didn't want to pay taxes, so he gave up his American citizenship. He became an Irish citizen living in Switzerland, which nobody can get to you then. But the other thing that he wanted to do was own gold. And American citizens at that time weren't allowed to own gold. It was pegged at $35 an ounce. So he was over there, and my father needed him. He had to go to Switzerland to contact him, and the show was getting worse. And so in 1967, his New Year's resolution was, I'm either going to buy the circus this year, or if not, I'm going to quit promoting the circus, and I'll continue still doing the rock and roll stuff, and he would do something else. So it took him basically all of 67 to raise the money. So it was my father, his brother, and they didn't have enough money to buy the circus. So the money guy was Roy Hofheinz, who built the Astrodome in Houston, Texas. And my dad had always promoted from 64 on all the non-sporting entertainment at the Astrodome. So he had the relationship. So that's how we acquired the circus in November of 67.
And the actual transaction happened in Rome at the Coliseum?
Happened in Rome at the Coliseum. Made great
imagining
publicity.
a giant bag of money. Here you go.
Yeah, so
probably wasn't exactly that.
What happened when we signed the deal, John Ringling North, they didn't even have wire transfers then. It was like the check, he had his Swiss banker there, and he bought gold at $35 an ounce, and his end of it was maybe like $5 million on that day. And then, a couple of years later, it was like $800 an ounce. So he got a better return than the circus.
Good deal. You got involved a few years after that, you started working.
I was at Boston University, and I was sophomore. And so he called me, and I went to Rome with him, and we bought the circus on Thursday. I go back to school Monday, and they said, what'd you do for the weekend? Well,
bought a circus in Rome?
Bought the circus, right? And so my summer jobs in 68 and 69, before I graduated, were going all over Eastern Europe hiring circus talent, whatever it was. And I would spend more time in Bulgaria in the summer than I did in the States. I knew every area. But that was sort of the beginning.
I read a quote you probably know by heart of your father talking about why it was important that a family own the circus as opposed to a large company. You may or may not have that quote at your fingertips, but you probably have something to say about that.
I have it.
Yeah.
No, so what happened, because my father was the operating control, but he didn't have the financial control of the business. So Hofheinz got ill, and he was concerned if something happened to him that his heirs may not like the setup so well. So we were in Los Angeles pitching a television show to Mattel, because in 1970, it was the candy companies, the cereal companies, and the toy companies that controlled Saturday morning television. So we pitched this show to the handlers, who were actually the parents of Ken and Barbie. Ken and Barbie were real people. And they said, look, we're not going to pay you what you want, but we'd like to buy the circus. So my father said, okay, let's work out a deal. So in 71, we sold Ringling Brothers Barnum Bailey to Mattel. My father and I had contracts, and we worked there until 1982, and bought the circus back from Mattel in 1982. They had some problems in all their businesses, so they were selling off all their non-toy businesses. So in 1982, our family bought it back. And that was when he said the circus was never meant to be owned by a large corporation or public corporation. If you think about it, 1982, Jimmy Carter was president. Interest rates were 19%. Tough to think about it. So he paid $8 million for the circus in 67. We sold it to Mattel for $40 million, but in stock in 71. And the stock went down to 50 cents a share. So it was
as high as something like 50 or something like that?
Yeah. So it was a disaster. We bought it back for $22.3 million. And my father and I put up $3 million. We borrowed $19 million at 20%. A little bit of a gamble. And we figured it would take us about
one way to put it.
7 years to pay it down. So 2 years later, we had paid down all of the debt. A lot of things happened. Interest rates went down was the biggest factor, but business was huge. It kept growing. That was in, I think, June of 84. And then 2 months later, my father passed away unexpectedly. So I'm 35 years old, and I have a circus and three little babies, and not knowing what the hell to do. You think you're ready, but you're never ready for this stuff. And so that was when I took over really the running of the whole operation of the circus. And in the interim, we had acquired Ice Follies and Holiday on Ice, which logistically was just the same or much simpler than the circus to operate. And we thought we could do a great job with it, and it turned out it was a disaster. So one day I was at this show in, I forget what city, but in a matinee, and I look up and I see people that look like I look now with gray hair and glasses, and I'm saying, where are the kids? Like there were no families. And I knew we had to get families. So I wound up going to the Disney company, and I pitched this idea of a 20-minute segment in Ice Follies, and we'd have Disney characters, and then it would give me a big marketing hook, and it'd be great. And so as I was being escorted out of the office in Burbank, at this point I had nothing to lose. So I turned around and I said, what if we took one of our shows and converted the whole thing to Disney characters and stories, and we'll call it Walt Disney's World on Ice. And so that was the beginning. And we opened the first Disney on Ice show in the early 80s, and we were on a year-to-year contract, which scares the hell out of you, especially with the kind of capital that we were investing in these productions every year, and not knowing, because Disney wasn't the hottest thing on the block at that time. And then I get a call, and this is a month after my father dies, that everybody at Disney you've been dealing with is gone. And there was a big shakeup, and Michael Eisner came in. And so I picked up the phone, I called him, and I said, I want to come out and see you. So I go out to Burbank. I walk in the office, and the first thing he says to me is, I don't know why we're in the ice show business. I don't like ice shows. And I'm going, oh, not this again. So I didn't know what to say. But I said, have you ever seen one? And he said, no. I said, okay, when we come to L.A., I want you to come watch the show with me, bring whoever you want from the Disney company, and tell us what you like, what you don't, what you want changed, all this stuff. Then give me a year to fix it, because that at least bought me a year, right? And if I come back in a year with it and you don't like it, I guess we'll be out of the ice show business or the Disney business. But if you do like it and you want to be in the business, I need at least a 5-year deal. A year later, good as his word, he came back. He said, wow, this is great. I love it. And we got a 5-year deal, and that was a big change with the whole company.
What were the things that he suggested that you change, and did any of those end up being part of the value proposition of the Disney on Ice show from then on, or anything?
Well, he had a lot of ideas, and they were not major ideas, but it was things that he wanted, and he was right about most of them. And we're constantly changing the shows, and it was an upgrade, and it was better, and we wanted to build something for the long term, and then we could do it if we had a longer term deal. But when I got the contract, all the terms that I thought that were in there except for one clause, and sometime in this 5-year period, we had to take the business out of North America, because we were just playing Mexico, U.S., and Canada. And I signed it. I would have signed anything. It didn't matter. And so that forced us to become a global company. And the first international place we went was Japan. And we have the same media partners in Japan today that we had 30-some years ago. And we're in Japan with all of our stuff about 26 weeks a year now. But we're now in 78 countries. And it was hell learning the international business. And the pitfalls and the mistakes were major.
And so you said something, 50%, greater than 50% of the business is now international outside the United States?
It's really 50-50. 50% outside the U.S., 50% domestic.
When you think about, because you and your family have just good experience in both the music side and the family entertainment side, there must be key similarities and key differences. Obviously, this is a music-oriented crowd for the most part. What are some of the things that you think, as you've gone through 30, 40 years of promoting family, that might be beneficial to learn about?
I think the big thing from our standpoint, my father, he had the Beatles on a couple tours and the Stones, and he was the first person ever to promote Sinatra in arenas. But the problem was you're not in control of your own business, because the acts are the acts, and the bigger the star, the less control you had. And with the circus, it was something that he could be in control with. And if you look at all of our businesses now, when you hear about vertical integration and companies that are vertical, we are the ultimate in that. There isn't anything that you see in one of our shows that we don't do. We have a huge 47-acre campus right outside of Sarasota, Florida, where we rehearse all the shows. We build every monster truck that you saw here, we build in the shop there. We build the engines, every costume, every scenic element. We own all the lighting. We own all the projection. We own all the sound. We bring everything with us. So we're in control of every aspect. And just in the U.S., we have 100 promoters around the U.S. and Canada living in all the major markets.
You do a few innovative things with promoters, too, if I'm not mistaken. There's a training program that's very sophisticated. What else would you say about the human resources?
My dad started as a promoter, so a lot of what we do, obviously technology has changed so much, but the system is not that different. We have regional vice presidents for the marketing, and then they have directors underneath them. And what happens, we have so much product going through every venue and every market that we want to have the same person year round. So the local media, they live in the markets for the most part. They have relationships, whether it's even for the charitable side of things. So we have a great way of leveraging the marketing dollars that we do spend, the local business. We're in the venues constantly, so we have great relationships with all the venue managers. And it's just a system that works for us. And so we have this pipeline. So now the idea is, what else can we put through the pipeline? And so we're always looking for new things, and there's a lot to come.
Before we jump to that, I wanted to stick on the education thing for a second. I read that you bought the circus in 67, and you opened the Ringling Brothers Clown College in 68. That's an interesting kind of instantly investing in, I guess, training or content development.
Everything we do, and people can look at investments in different ways. Some of the obvious ones when you see the absolute result of it. The other investments that you make are when you're wrong. You learn nothing really from being successful. But the mistakes, and, of course, I'm not here. You didn't see any of the mistakes on the videos, right? But that's where you learn. We view every show that we have out there every week as a laboratory. And we could do great in Minneapolis, and we could be in Indianapolis the next week and do lousy. We're saying, what's going on? We are open to trying things constantly, and we're relentless. And because we're on top of the business, and because we are in the U.S. and in North America, 100% of the risk falls on us. So that's from the investment in the shows and the product and in the consumer products, which is, as you all know, a huge part of our business, the merchandise, food items that we have. We actually have a food inventor on staff to create non-existing categories of food that we can sell.
What's the best one currently? What's the?
My favorite is s'more puffs. You can tell I eat a lot of marshmallows and chocolate with graham crackers. So we created this s'more puff that actually lasts, and package it there. It's become great, and so we're constantly looking for new things.
So let's move into the present and future. You mentioned before that you've got a platform, and it's about, I would say, developing intellectual property that you can take a bunch of places and monetize and use in the ways that you've described. How would you describe where it is today, and where do you think it's going? And obviously, we'll circle back to the circus on this topic.
Okay. Well, it was really great to see Jared up here because he's so young. And I'm very fortunate. I have 3 daughters, and for whatever reason, they all decided they wanted to come in the business. So they've worked elsewhere first, but all 3 of them are in the business, and they range from 34 to almost 40. And they have their own kids and all of this. And so they're the future. So a few things that they've done, I always said I learned everything I know from my father and everything I don't know from my daughters. But they banned me from all meetings. And I know Jared comes in there, he never sees me in a meeting, right? He'll pass me in the hall. But they said, Dad, you hijack every meeting. And I said, you're right, you've got to do it. And I said, but there's one caveat. I'll stay out of every meeting as long as I'm downloaded and never blindsided. So that's what happens. My youngest daughter, Juliet, just recently became chief operating officer of the whole company, and she's moving down to Florida probably within 5 months. And so she'll be there every single day. They're now in their portions of every month. But it's been a long process. You hear about generations, and I don't know if you come from families that were in the business first or anything. And it's an incredible dynamic, but when it works, it's the greatest thing ever. And if it doesn't work, it's total hell.
What makes a difference, do you think, for a family business that actually works versus one that is total hell?
I think for somebody like me, when about 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago, when I turned 65, next year I'll be 70, so that's a scary thought. But my daughters were all in the business. And I sat them down. I said, okay, we've got to get serious about this succession planning, because I was totally unprepared. And we never know what's going to happen to us. And you're never ready to get married. You're never ready to have kids. And you're never ready to run a business like this. But you can do things to prepare. And a lot of it is for me to step back, get out of the day-to-day, to give guidance. And right now, there are only 2 people in the whole company that report to me. That's my general counsel and our president, who is outside president. But my daughters don't report to me. No one in the company besides those 2 people report to me. And what do? I think a lot. I go around, and we have this 600 people in the office there, and I walk around, and I go in somebody's office, and I know they're saying, oh, shit, it's 20 minutes of my life I'm never getting back. But for me, it allows me in about 2 hours to understand everything that's going on, but most importantly, the issues that everybody might have. Not that I make the decisions on, or the determinations, but I want to teach. I mean, because I have a lot of experience, but the best way to teach, I found, is through asking the questions. Because the only thing I can teach, everybody's smarter than I am, but is to broaden how people think and to think of every aspect of everything. And I think we have that process. And with a vertical company, we're always thinking about what else can we do with what we have. I always break the company down to what we own, what we rent. That's the stuff we license. And now we're getting into the fee-based operations. A lot more of that for people. It's more
What's an example of that?
What?
Just in case people might not know.
Well, a couple of years ago, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Women of Faith, which were towards a faith-based, actually created by the largest Christian book publisher in the country. And it was a way for them to get their authors out there. And it's primarily women, motivational, with religion, and also with religious music. So there'll be Amy Grant will be on a tour, CeCe Winans, a lot of great music. So they didn't know what to do. And we said, okay, furnish the talent, do the creative however you want. We designed the set, we built it, we toured the whole thing. It was turnkey form for a fee. And it worked, and we did it for 3 years. And then I think WME bought the whole company, and when they took Oprah out, it sort of sent everything in the wrong direction. But it was a great experience for everybody in the company to learn a little bit about that, because it's different when you're working for yourself than when you're providing a service for somebody else. So that's now something that we're much more involved in, and there'll be a lot of shows coming out that you'll see our involvement with in a lot of ways in building them, because we can do everything.
That's the part of the business portfolio, is the ability to do that. A lot of people in the room, Craig and Jonathan and others, directly or indirectly are in the family entertainment business, and everybody has an interest in what can be learned from it. So tell us who you are and where you're from.
Craig Newman. I'm an agent with APA and admirer of the company and all that you guys are doing. And as somebody who's been an agent for rock and roll and sort of shifted into family space, first through Magic and Illusion and a few theatricals, and now more into the kids and family space, what I have found is there aren't a lot of us out there. And maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing. But because of that, a lot of IP gets funneled my way. Working at an agency where we have talent and literary and everything else, a lot of IP gets sent my way. The word no has become very strong for me. There's no other way to say it. A lot of schlock comes down the avenue, and you have to be able to say, there's really not much that I can do with this. It's appreciated that you brought it my way. I mean, on the grandiose scale that you're working, I have to think that your company is constantly being approached with IP and will you take us on? Can you create something? So my first question is, how do you and your team determine if that's a road worth going down? And then my second question, as the father of a 5-year-old, is when you're doing market research or deciding if you're going to put something out, do you guys actually sit with children and listen to ideas and see what's exciting to the kids themselves? So it's a 2-part question.
Good question. So the first one, and I've always been a serial meeting person. And my daughters would always say, like if I go out to LA and I'll schedule myself from 7 a.m. till nighttime, they said, why are you having all these meetings with these people? Nothing's going to happen. I said, look, as long as you're meeting with smart people, and in today's world, no one tomorrow is going to be in the job they're in today, and these people are all going to be in better places, and they're always maybe going to have something of interest to us, and it's better that you make the connection before. And I've always done that, and I tend to take, and I shouldn't say this here because you'll call me, or I return every phone call typically within 12 hours if I can. I'm very good at that, and I think it's important because you learn. It's about people and relationships, and that's how you build them. And people I've done business with 30 years ago, and they're now someplace else, and it's happened time and time again, and you benefit from that. But it's a way of educating yourself on the process of how we go through it. And actually, what's wonderful is my daughter is spearheading the first strategic plan in the history of our company right now. And a lot of that deals with prioritizing, because people call and I will take every meeting. I have no discipline when it comes to that. So I don't always get everybody else involved, but if I see something that I think has potential, then I'll bring everybody else, the team that needs to be on it. But we're very disciplined. We run pro formas on everything. We do market research. And I will say I am a huge advocate of Ticketmaster, and I have to bring it up because with all the other systems, and we play every venue, and we're all over the world, the data that we get and the knowledge that we get from our consumers from Ticketmaster is in one place. We know where they are. We can go, we can send things out to them to test. I mean, we test key art, crazy things, and we've got enough history and years where we can benchmark one show that we figure is in a median, and how does that resonate against other properties. And I will tell you, ultimately, it winds up being within 3% one way or another, which is pretty good. But we do a tremendous amount of research, and a lot is with the support of Ticketmaster. So for us, yes, they sell tickets, but it's a lot more. And I think it's a huge benefit. And when my kids were little, they were my market research. It's a lot more sophisticated today.
And it's interesting because the parents are the buyers, but the kids are kind of the ultimate test of whether it's a hit, I suppose. Or is that not true?
It's both true. So what happens is the parents are definitely the decision maker, like we have Sesame Street Live with Sesame Street. They are actually more the decision maker with Disney. The kids are the drivers for Monster Jam and for hot properties that we've had in the past, like when we had the Doodle Bops out there, that was totally kids driving their parents to it. And I think, so that's the thing. If it's something that the parents don't know what to watch unless the kids tell them, unless it's the old school stuff. So that's
that
sort of
more
what
when
the
there's
balance
a television property that the kids know about and they're into or something like that?
Well, television or Amazon or YouTube. YouTube is huge now. And I mean, think about where everybody consumes their information from and where they watch on their devices and stuff.
There's a group called the Double Clicks that my business partner takes his daughter to whenever they're in town, and she knew about them solely from YouTube. So their entire audience is built on kids knowing about them on YouTube, and then the demand is driven by that.
Rick Mueller with AEG Presents. I got two questions. First, in the family entertainment space, what has been your philosophy / approach to dynamic pricing, and how has it impacted kind of the average yield of a lot of your consistently touring properties? And then this may be more of an observational question. Music business people can tend to be myopic. As somebody who sits,
which people?
Music business people.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it happens. When you look at concerts rolling out, from good ones to bad ones, do you see a common difference / mistake in what you Feld Entertainment rolls out a campaign for one of your products versus a concert tour that you think concert promoters are making a mistake on?
What's the first question?
First question is
dynamic pricing.
Dynamic pricing.
We are tremendously active in that across all of our properties.
Have you guys seen a big yield increase on your average grosses as a result, or has it filled up the stands more and maybe it's more peanuts and popcorn and novelties that you get the improvement from?
We look at everything different than most of you would here. We don't look just at ticket price. We know our per cap for merchandise and concessions. So we look at everything holistically. We don't look at a ticket price and can you drive it up there.
Can you tell us what the percent of non-ticket revenue is in the per cap?
Absolutely not.
That's why I asked. I wanted to know. Is it greater than 25?
All I will say, it is different with every line of business.
Sure.
I mean, which is the fascinating part of it. So dynamic pricing, yes. How we look at it may be different than how most of you look at it, is what I would say. We have a half a dozen people, at least that many, that's all they do. Then looking at music tours, it's very different because if you think about it, most of our tours are doing multiple runs. So let's just take Disney on Ice, for example, and you pick a city, it doesn't matter. But we're doing anywhere from 7 to 12 performances in a week. And maybe we're there 2 weeks, maybe we're there 1 week. So we have almost infinite capacity if you think about it. Not all days are created equal, as we know, or not show times and things like that. So we have to have a longer view at the whole promotional thing and how you build it. And we may be in more or different kinds of media than you're going to be in with music acts. And I mean, it's one thing if you have Taylor Swift. It's another thing if you have an artist that isn't going to sell out in the first 5 minutes. I suspect it's different, that you're going to promote it differently.
We have a few shows that don't sell out.
Yeah.
Just a few.
But we are in it, and I mean, we have, let's say, a 12-week plan. We don't really go out and sell a year in advance. We don't find that's the right or the best use of our resources, or we get the results. We've tried it, and it doesn't really pay off in the same way. I understand the music business, and I mean, I wish I could do it, because then I'd know what the hell was happening in 6 or 8 months. But yeah, we don't.
You know, we were talking yesterday about NASCAR and the importance of a star driver like Dale Earnhardt Jr. or some of the others, and how if the tour itself is popular, that matters less. But I think it's a similar thing. The property in your case is what's most important, I would think. The intellectual property transcends any name.
I mean, one of the great things about Disney on Ice, in the 35 years, Mickey Mouse has never missed a show. Never complained about a dressing room. And, you know, so it's a great thing. And that goes back to what I said originally. It's really control of the content. And even though, you know, everybody thinks that Disney does Disney on Ice, it's the greatest compliment that we get that they think Disney does or that Marvel does Marvel, because we become anonymous. Sometimes it's maybe not the greatest for the ego or other things to build the Feld brand, but it works and it's been successful. And it's, you know, if you think about it, we have this long relationship with Disney through every regime that's been there. The reason is trust. I mean, we pay them huge amounts of royalties annually, but it's for Disney, it's not a rounding error. They're just so huge. So it goes to, they trust us with their most valuable franchises and properties. And that's how we look at everything. We look at everything for the long term. It doesn't mean it winds up being long term, but we have a long view, and we'll take gambles for 5 years down the pike that it'll pay off. And we stick with the stuff, and we either have to make it work or we can't.
I think that's kind of a perfect moment to talk about the circus. Speaking of the long view, because very, very long-running property. I think 19th century is when the
146 years.
146-year property, which came to an end in 2017, or
it came to an end May 21st.
Right. So
of this year.
Thinking about the process of evaluating that and what the various contributors to that decision, I think a lot of us would just love to kind of get a little bit on the inside of that decision process.
The decision, you look at it, and it was an economic decision. There's no question about that. But I don't know that there's another company that's 146 years old that is operating under the same business model that they did 146 years ago today. And that was a problem for us. Yes, there was a decline in attendance, but the worst week we ever had was 50,000 people. It would go between 50 and 130,000 people every week. So people were coming, low average ticket price, costs that no one on this planet could comprehend. You know, we had the 2 largest privately owned railroad trains on the planet. We had each show preschool through 12th grade. We had 20...
You mean that you had to
schooling.
Provide schooling?
We had all the families coming.
Right.
So you just keep going, and it became a point where it was the point of no return. But then you take with that, of course, the animal rights issues had a factor to do with it. You can't ignore that. But the other thing, more importantly, is if you look historically, the world today, we live in a specialist world. The circus is generalist. It had to be all things to all people when it started because it was the only entertainment. If you look at all of our other businesses, Monster Jam logically would have been a part of the circus. You would have monster trucks in the circus. It would have worked. But that's its own thing. Marvel would have been part of something else. And that was the motorcycles and that and the stunt show. That's its own thing. Disney on Ice. What were the ice shows? Ice Follies, Holiday on Ice. They were the circus of the ice because they were just generalists. So what do? We didn't even realize we did it when we did it back then, but it became a specialist thing. And it became Disney focused. Now today, we have Sesame Street, we have all these other things, but they're very specialized entertainment. And that's how everything has gone. Look at whoever thought there'd be 1,000 channels you could watch. I mean, you could watch anything that could pop into your mind or not. You can, in 2 minutes, go and view it. Nobody ever thought that. And that's the issue now when you see what's happening with cable, what's happening with how people are digesting their entertainment. It's completely different. And there's another thing. Everybody says, they talk about millennials, and then they say their experiences. Everybody wants an experience, but I've never heard anyone define the experience. And the Holy Grail is defining that experience. And I spend probably every waking moment that I'm not talking to you trying to determine what is the experience. And can we get it in throughput with 50,000 people at a time, or is it 100 people at a time, or is it 50? Because that changes all the economics as you go through it. So that's really what I do in my spare time. And we're trying to redefine it. And now, like, we have these Fam Fests for Monster Jam, where we'll get 55,000 people to the show, and we'll put 35,000 people this separate ticketed price for the Fam Fest. And we do that with Supercross. So now that's coming into everything we do, and it's different levels of it. But we're always looking and thinking, and I go back to that. We just have this entertainment laboratory, and that's how I view the business. And we're willing to make the investments, and we're gamblers. I mean, we gamble all the time. We have a lot of risk.
Hi, I'm Dean Gelfand from Dreamer Media. I'm a merchandiser. I believe you and your family invented merchandising as we know it today. I take my team to the circus to learn how to sell stuff. And I just thought maybe you could spend a minute and talk about the music industry takes merchandising, but it's an accident. It's a mistake. But for some reason, I think you guys take that a lot more seriously. And I thought maybe you would talk a little bit about how it came to be. And
I'm happy to do that. We spend a lot of time on merchandising. So when we look at shows, when we look at entertainment, we look at everything. So the first thing that we look at is the merchandising. And why do I say the first thing? Because the lead time on merchandise is longer than the lead time to build the show. So when anybody in our company has an idea, and we have these meetings, and we say, we might do a show on this. The troops go out, and they're buying every piece of merchandise that exists to see what's in the marketplace. Then we put our designers on it, and we may never do the show. But if we do, we're ready. And we design everything in-house. We engineer it in-house. We manufacture everything in China. We product safety test it. We re-import it. We distribute it to our shows, or in the case of Monster Jam, we have a lot of direct-to-retail that we do now, and also we have a robust online business, online store with that. And then our people sell it to you in the venues. So we also have a lifetime guarantee on every product. Somebody has a problem, they don't even have to send it back. They call. We have a 24/7 800 number. A human is always answering it, and this is global. Anything, we'll send you a new one. If there's a chronic problem with an item, we would like to have it back to really discover what the defect is. But that's how we operate. And also, you only get scalpers or bots or whatever you want to call them because you're not priced to market. So with merchandise, what was happening, and in your business, maybe you know, it's a business where you're typically guilty until proven innocent.
In what sense?
In what sense? With everybody wants to be your partner, but you may not know them. So what happens is a term called hyping. So if you put a $8 price on something, and the vendor says, you know what, people will pay $10 for this. Well, they're getting your $2 extra that you should be getting. So it's an art of pricing to the absolute highest point that you can get before you start turning off the customer. Because if you don't get it, the person selling it is going to be getting it anyway. The consumer is going to pay for it. It's just, do you want to get it, or do you want somebody you don't know getting it? that's how we look at it. The other thing that's very important, when we go in, we create an environment. All the people that are selling are highly trained in every product, but they're also outfitted. They're trained in customer service, and every item on the stand is priced according to the other item. Once you throw something out of balance, it screws up all your per caps and everything. So there's an art of pricing to keep pushing people to the next item and the next level. It's no different than when, you go and you buy coffee at a Starbucks and they say you want a small, medium, or a large. I mean, look at the increments, and it sort of tells you how to do it. I mean, this isn't rocket science, but it's something we pay an incredible amount of attention to. We have almost zero shrinkage. It's maybe 1/100%, which is highly unusual in this business. And it's the way we operate.
So I got one of those spark guns from the circus in 1978, and it stopped working last week. So I'd really like to get a replacement.
Send it back. You get a new one.
No problem.
For sure.
Yeah, hey, Dan Hoffman. I work for Concord Music. So, yeah, our company actually has a very successful kids property called Kids Bop.
What's Kids Bop?
Kids Bop, yeah. It has a live show.
Yeah.
We have a deal with Live Nation, and we have a 24/7 Sirius XM channel, among other things. My question is about your international, because you're so successful. How much work do you do to sort of customize it for international and sort of figure out the audience there, and really, do you do a lot of research on that? What do you do for international?
We do a lot of research, and yes, we customize for every market, and we voice dub in every language. So, for instance, on Disney on Ice, we'll be dubbing in 40 different languages. I mean, we have a team of people, that's all they do is international voice dubbing. And it's really important, and it makes a huge difference. We even dub the lyrics in most places to the local language. But we're also, I mean, for instance, we have Monster Jam in Saudi Arabia for the first time in May. And we thought, you can't take any women. So we could have no women athletes or no women in the crew. And then, in addition, they wouldn't allow women in the audience. So we only had men and their sons. And we were hoping, it was very popular. So we're hoping, we're going back next year. This year we were in Riyadh. Next year we're going to be in Riyadh and Jeddah. And we think we'll get family permits, which would be huge to have women there as well.
And do you think you can actually influence that kind of change on their part? Do you think you can?
Well, I think they wanted to see what it was. And then they are trying to broaden things. Women can now get a driver's license there, which is a big deal. So there's a lot of interest in that. But, we spent a lot of time on our Monster Jam business because it's different. No one ever knew it outside the U.S. It's a totally American thing. So we were at the Bird's Nest, you saw in the video, in Beijing this summer. We have 55,000 people. And as a result of that, the second week in October in Inner Mongolia, which is part of China, they have every year a Motorfest that in 2 weeks draws 2 million people. So they said, do you want to come? So we built a 9,000-seat pop-up stadium for Monster Jam there. And then people were up on the hills, and our people that went, that had to go there, they were sleeping in shipping containers. There were no hotels. There's nothing there except 12-lane highways that go to no place. And it's this field. They have every kind of motor, sport, and everything that exists for 2 weeks. But we will go, we take the shots that nobody else does. And when there's a court system that we can win in, we'll self-promote and take the risk like what we do here. When there's not, we'll get partners. Or like if you do business in Japan, the advertising agencies own all the media, basically. So I don't care what show you have. You could come in. You can't buy media. So you need a media partner. So it changes, and it changes in every country like that. But, we're in Brunei, and we had to put black tights on the ice skaters. They couldn't wear leotards. It was the clerics come and visit the show in advance, and they tell you what you have to do.
So, Kenneth, I'd like to thank you for joining us here at Aspen Live. And if there's anything, any kind of overview thoughts that you'd have for people specifically in the music business about what they can borrow from the way that you all have had success, I think we'd love to hear it.
Well, first of all, thanks for listening to me and all this. And I never want to compete with the bar, ever. I just think, we look at every detail. I mean, we're the worst micromanagers on the planet, and it's now in our culture to do it. And we have this new facility, and we actually could rehearse any concert that you have. We have 2 rehearsal studios, each the size of Staples Center, back to back there.
I've been there. They're unbelievable.
We don't have the seats, and we have more hanging capacity than any venue in North America. So we can hang 500,000 pounds from each venue with the steel. And we could build all the sets 50 feet away. And if you're ever in that part of the world, get in touch with me in advance, or if you know someone else within the company, we'll give you a tour, because it's like nothing that you've ever seen. But my point is that it's the first time we ever had everyone in the company under one roof. It is totally, in the short time, it's been 4 or 5 years, changed the culture of our company. And we now have motorsports people working on ice shows, and there's a cross-pollination I've never seen exist. The silos are gone. What we found is you get the best ideas from sometimes the people you least expect it from. And what I've learned is listen to everyone. There's no bad idea. And it's given people, I think, a feeling that they have a voice in what we're doing. And we're much less top down than we ever were. I mean, nobody's perfect, but we're always working at it. But I think it's definitely changed the culture. And for me, that's maybe the most gratifying thing.
Awesome. Thanks again, Kenneth Feld.
Thank you.
Talk about an icon. Special thanks to Jim McCarthy from Goldstar for doing a great interview, and Kenneth for allowing us to air their session. Really, really enjoyed this one.
Hi, this is Steve Martin, not the actor, not the PR guy, the agent from APA. I'll be on Promoter 101 podcast.
We had a blast, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, with our special 12 Days of Christmas. And in case you missed them, here's who we had on.
Day 1, Move Concerts, Phil Rodriguez.
On day 2, we had rock journalist Holly Gleason.
Day 3, Rocks Off, Jake Snivarowski.
On day 4, we had recording icon Ted Cohen.
Day 5, Cannabis King, Benji Gold.
On day 6, we were joined by New York legendary mogul Fast Eddie Micone.
Day 7, security expert Argus's Mike Fruitman.
On day 8, one of my favorites, ICM partners Scott Pang.
Day 9, Prudential Center Sans Day.
Day 10, we had Sabian's Bob Rupp.
Day 11, Entertainment Travel's Nick Gold.
In closing out the 2017 edition of the 12 Days of Christmas, we were joined by United Talent Agency's Tim Bohr.
If you missed any of them, you can catch up because they're still available, as always, at promoter101.net.
Hi, it's Jake Gold from the Management Trust in Toronto, Canada. Yes, Canada, where all you guys want to eventually live. You're here on Promoter 101.
Dan, it's a new year. Do you have a resolution to tweet more?
No.
Well, then how about we talk about some of the tweets that you did make in this first week of 2018. Walk us through what you were thinking when you wrote some of these Promoter 101 tweets. When you see an amazing festival lineup, get really excited, but you know yourself well enough to know that you're not going to stand in a hot-ass field for a 3-day weekend. Hashtag old promoter.
I know the festivals are a great hang, but it's also a great time to catch up on office work while everybody's out in the desert sweating their balls off. Of course, we stream the live feed, and it's great to get a sample of what's come while you're listening to all that, but man, it can get hot out there in the desert.
How about this one? It's so exciting to see everyone announcing their summer M&M tour dates. Oh, sorry, I mean your 2018 festival lineups.
Yeah, the creativity seems to have gone out of the festival buying thing when you're building your lineups right now. It's basically a touring circuit, but I do kind of want to see M&M this year, so what the fuck?
when management needs to approve the local support in a 180 capacity venue.
Come on, guys. You got to trust the local promoter to handle support at this level. The micromanagement's got to chill just a little bit.
And that'll do it for Promoter 101 tweets this week. You can follow Dan on Twitter. He's at the Jew. And if you have your own Promoter 101 thoughts, feel free to tweet them at us or email them over. Anything that makes us smile is going to get used on the air.
This is John Giddings, and I'm on Promoter 101.
This week's war story comes to us from APA's Craig Newman.
Mr. Craigie Fresh Newman. Craig, welcome to the podcast.
Always a pleasure to be here with you on this most gentlemanly of podcasts.
What do you got for us?
You know, I was thinking about this the other day, how the good things that we do in life resound and echo into the future, and how sometimes a negative can turn into a positive. But sometimes it takes time.
Can you explain what you mean?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about the artist that sort of got me on path many, many years ago. I signed a little group out of Chicago called the Plain White Tees, and they were really playing clubs and some small college gigs. In fact, they had this song called Hey There, Delilah that hadn't even hit radio yet. And one look at these boys, you knew that success was in the wings, and we worked real hard, real hard, all of us over time, to take this Chicago club band and turn them into something magnificent. And there were a lot of tactics that I used that I learned from some of my mentors, people like Troy Blakely and Jim Gosnell. And really, to hone in on the strengths of the band, we really went after a college crew. We started playing a lot of college gigs, started doubling the money, tripling the money. Before you knew it, the songs were starting to hit. We took a path with some really cool support slots, but we also made sure to play some headline gigs throughout the years and really put together a wonderful platform. This was probably around 2004, 2005. The band really started to make some headway. I suffer from this issue where I become friends with my artists. And I've been told over the years by some very, very wise people, you got to be careful mixing business and pleasure or becoming too close with your artist, that in the end, that can actually be a hurtful thing. But I can't, you know, that song, I can't help falling in love. I can't help falling into friendship with people that I care about. And especially when I'm working for them day in and day out, on the phone, at events, getting on planes, getting on tour buses that I physically can't fit on.
You're talking about the bunks.
I'm talking about the bunks.
You know, for a Jewish man, you were of good stature size. You come in at what, 6'4"?
6'7".
Jesus Christ, that's a whole lot of Jew.
And depending on the year, anywhere from 265 to 275.
Some Hebrew national right there.
Yeah, baby. So, you know, it was funny when I would go on short jaunts with them, and they knew, put Newman in the back of them.
In the lounge.
In the lounge.
You sleep on the couch.
Yeah, they were good about that. So anyways, time went on. Things just really started to grow, and Delilah hit. And I remember this one year, I put together a tour. This was sort of a throwback to the 80s when artists would go and perform at malls.
Like Tiffany.
Debbie Gibson.
Scott Baio.
Scott Baio.
We just did a Scott Baio reference on Promoter 101.
And you know, I have a Scott Baio song that I will share with you one day. Maybe you can use it. It's pretty good. I actually played it for him.
But wait, digress.
So anyway, there was this opportunity to do several malls around the country and have a national promotion. And it was right around the time when the song was on the radio and the band was getting some TV.
A big Chachi-size mall tour.
Big Chachi-size mall tour. And here was what was cool. I looked at the itinerary, and one of the malls was my mall from when I was a kid.
Philly.
In Bucks County, outside of Northeast Philly, a mall called the Oxford Valley Mall. If people out there know, there's an amusement park called Sesame Place for kids. It's a very famous amusement park for kids. It's right by the Oxford Valley Mall. So I look at this itinerary and I'm like, holy heck, I'm going home. But not just going home, I'm really going home. You know, Mom dropped me off at this mall every weekend of my youth. And what was even more interesting was a local newspaper caught the story and actually wound up doing a piece. And it was funny because I'm not the artist. I'm just the agent coming along for the ride. But the local newspaper actually did a piece on me. I still remember when Plain White Tees saw that newspaper. They're like, geez, we didn't even get an article in here and you did. And we had a little laugh about it. Walking into that mall, I felt like just the king. I was walking into my mall with this band that was on TV and on the radio, and we were working so hard. And the place was packed. And they went up and they did their set and they even gave me a shout out. And I'm going to digress again, but I have a soft spot in my heart for artists that take the time to recognize the people that put in the work, of their managers, their agents, when they actually take a minute to thank you from stage. A lot of the artists I work with take that time to really make sure that the people that put in the hard work get recognized. And we don't ask for it, but when it happens, it's a real blessing and it really makes me feel good about what I do. This is where the story takes a bit of a turn.
we had just put so much energy into this, and there came a time when, band management, whomever was involved, decided that they wanted to take another direction on the agency side. And I still remember that day. I remember that day getting the phone call. I could just hear it in the voice of the person who was calling me. And I don't know. It instantly destroyed me. It broke my heart. I had never felt like that in my job before. I still can't really pinpoint it. We tried to save it. We couldn't save it. I think this was probably around 2009 because they had all come to my wedding. I mean, these guys had all come to my wedding in 2007.
They were your bros.
They were my family. And so when we parted ways, I called my mother. And I want to just say, like when I said in the top of this that goodness resounds through the time, I always say when I speak to people about this business, I like to say that I do my job in such a way that my mother would be proud. And I remember when this all went down, I called her and she could hear it in my voice. And she very wisely kind of explained to me that everything was going to be okay. And I think it was at that time that she said to me, you know what? These things come around full circle. In my head, on that day, I said to myself, one day we'll be back together. I never took the platinum records off my wall. I never took the tour posters down. And this was in 2009. 8 years later, 8 years, just always believing that we were meant to work together. 2017, a few months back, the opportunity arose and we all got on a phone call together. And I remember a couple of the guys saying, of all the personnel we've been around, of all the years of touring, everything, nobody has ever been more passionate about this band than you, and we want to be back with you again. And it just sort of hit me, that moment from when we had parted to this moment when we got back together. It was meant to be. And now we're back together, and there's going to be a new record out next year, and I've heard the songs, and they're brilliant, and it just really feels great.
You matured as an agent. They matured as artists. I can't imagine by any means you're representing the same act. They have the same name, the same songs, but their talent is different and probably grown as musicians. Your friendship has changed and grown, and you guys are doing different business than you were doing in the Hey There Delilah moment.
I mentioned earlier that I've listened to the new music, and you all will too very soon. Listening to that music, it's kind of brilliant. You hear those moments from sort of the genesis of the band and that musical style mixed together with the today amazingness that makes, a song chart on the radio. And I'm listening to this music and it's taking me back and keeping me in the current moment simultaneously. And yeah, they have grown. It's the same 5 members. They've stayed together, which, let's be honest, can be a rare thing. They've stayed close of friends. Now they have their own families and kids, but they're still doing it. They're still going out there. And Tom is still playing Delilah nightly, and he still sounds brilliant when he sings it.
I want to thank you so much for sharing your war story with us. And obviously the point of this was, had you been a dick to the band when they fired you, the opportunity for them to come back and you to grow that business with them later never would have come full circle.
I couldn't agree more. And guess what? I got to do it in such a way that made my mom proud.
Promoter 101.
Well, I got to give it up to Craigie Fresh and the Plain White Tees. They are actually showcasing at APAP January 13th, I think it is. I'm not good with dates. They'll be there, so be sure to check them out. Craig will be repping them fresh as always. Craigie Fresh is always entertaining, and I got to give a shout out to my fellow Penn Stater and fellow Philadelphian. Great stuff.
Steve Strange, X-Ray Touring, Promoter 101.
Celebrating birthdays the week of January 5th to January 11th, 2018.
This Friday, that's Friday, January 5th. Happy birthday, Rabbi Dave, Dave Rubin, Rob Borden, Matt Ziegler, Sean Sidday from the Prudential Center, and of course, Grant Aslan in Denver, Colorado. Happy birthday to him.
Saturday, icon, legendary record exec to the stars, Ted motherfucking Cohen.
On Monday the 8th, we're wishing a happy birthday to Ron Chamberlain.
On Tuesday, United Talents Agency's Jeremy Holgerson and manager Tommy Lipnick.
On Wednesday, happy birthday to Jeff Evans, UTA's Dave Shapiro, and Jason Pitzer.
Thursday, January 11th, Alex Raven's birthday. Hats off to you, buddy.
We see him in an APAP for a drink or two. Happy birthday to everybody from the gang at Promoter 101.
Hey, it's Dave Chumley here from Primary Talent International in London. I'm really privileged to be on Promoter 101.
For our second feature interview, we're joined by Core Software's Scott Aller. He joins the podcast today to talk about the power of data.
Promoter 101, we are in Denver, Colorado. I'm joined from Core Software's Scott Aller. Dude, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, absolutely.
The industry is abuzz about your industry. We're all talking about the data.
Okay.
We know that we need to maximize our social media. We need to be doing the right things with those email lists and organizing them correctly. We all know that we're supposed to do that. Many of us don't know what that actually means, but we've got our buzzwords. You're the expert.
Experts might be a reach. There's a lot of very, very smart, intelligent people in data and analytics. My background with it comes from spending multiple years with Ticketmaster, where I worked really closely with the live analytics guys over there, and currently with Core Software. What we do is sell software that helps you aggregate, deduplicate, and turn your data into something that is actionable, right? And actionable is another one of those buzzwords. So for the most part, what I've witnessed over the last 7 or 8 years that I've been in the industry is that, the music industry is a little bit behind some of the other entertainment industries who are using data in very big ways, namely the sports industry. And that's typically, who we've worked with at Core Software in the past because, and there's a little bit of a business model difference between those two.
They're selling tickets and normally in the same places.
Correct. The difference, though, is that they're selling season tickets, right? And so when you're selling season tickets, you're nurturing these very loyal relationships with fans, and you're trying to sit there and say, what can my retention rates look like? How can I find new season ticket holders? How can I find single ticket buyers that I can turn into or nurture into season ticket holders, right? So that's one of the big questions that the sports industry is constantly asking. Now, I come from a music background. I toured for 5 years professionally right out of school, and that's all I did. And I was kind of the de facto band manager at the same time, right?
You toured in what fashion?
I was a drummer with a band called Boulder Acoustic Society. So
drummer / in facto manager, right?
Exactly. Exactly. One of the things that I always worked really closely with our touring agents on was how can we maximize our tour routing? How can I reduce costs while we're on the road? How can I make things more efficient? Those were the types of questions that always really caught my attention and were really, really interesting to me. And to this day, my heart still lies deeply in the music industry. And so I'm constantly asking myself these questions, and I'm friends with folks like you, and I'm friends with folks like Chris Zacher at Levitt Pavilion. And these are the things that I think about. So at the end of the day, it's why is the music industry behind the sports industry? How can some of the practices that the sports industry has learned over the last decade apply to music?
Obviously, the difference is we're playing with different levels of marketing budgets. These pro sports teams can afford R&D on a much greater level than most promoters.
Sure.
So you're dealing with ownerships that are just playing with bigger budgets. So that's why they're starting there. I mean, we talk about it. Porn is usually leading the way in breaking new technology, because they can afford to go there first, because the first one in is going to get most of the eyeballs. Like right now, the fight for VR. Porn is way ahead of everybody else because the people that break through there first are going to get the clients that spend the most money to try it. And it's really funny because you joke about it, but what porn has done for technology is amazing. Sports is breaking the way, and we're just going to copy them now that they've done the R&D for us.
I think sports would appreciate that, right?
You were wondering how I was going to loop porn back into sports,
I love the start of the show. We're 5 minutes in and already talking porn, only with Dan Steinberg. No, I think you're right. And the budget thing is a really good point, right? Look, if I can do anything on this podcast that's remotely tangible and useful, it's to help demystify what data and analytics is. What does that even mean? And how can it help somebody who's in the music industry, a promoter or artist or a fan or an artist manager, whatever it might be, right?
Well, let's do this. I mean, normally we'd talk history and we'd say, how did you get your start and blah, 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 which is usually fascinating, but I don't want to waste my time with you because it's precious. You're one of those guys that when we talk, you drop my jaw with the numbers and the things that you say. Our time with you is too precious to waste on, I went to college here, whatever. So with that in mind, what are the early steps of things that people should be doing that they don't need to invest $200,000 in to get their feet wet?
So this is one of the really important things, and this comes from conversations that I've had with a lot of promoters, right? There's sometimes a misunderstanding about what data is and whether or not they're entitled to use it. And I understand that there are a lot of back office negotiations that happen between artists, promoters, venues, ticketing agents, ticketing companies rather, and it's not always possible. But what you should always be doing is asking for the ticketing data.
And that's where most of it comes from, right? The ticketing company is the purchasers. People purchase from them, so they're the ones that house most of that data.
They have the most amount of what I'm going to call structured data that promoters and artists can get their hands on easily. Now, the venue has that data. They're getting it from Ticketmaster no matter what, or Ticketfly, or Veritix, or eTix, you name it. There's a lot of ticketing companies out there. They all might have very different practices in how they share the data. But at the end of the day, if you're just not even asking for it, then you're missing out on a big opportunity. And that's even true if you don't know what to do with it next.
Because you can abuse it, right? You risk people like opting out, right? Every time you send them an email and you oversend them, right? You can do damage to your long-term use of that data.
You're probably doing more damage by not having the data and understanding what people are interested in the first place. Let's say that the only way that you're targeting an audience for marketing promotions, email promotions, specifically let's talk email promotions, and the only segmentation you're capable of doing for fans are based off of their zip code.
Geo-targeting.
Right. So let's say that you're spreading out and you're sending an email and you're not doing deep enough segmentation. You're sending this one type of message to people. If it has zero relevance to them, they're going to stop opening your email altogether, right? I think you're doing more abuse to your fans by not analyzing some of this behavioral data than you could ever do by overanalyzing the data. That's my opinion. Maybe other people have different opinions, but so going back to asking for the information from your ticketing company, one of the most key behavioral indicators of what somebody's going to do in the future is understanding how they've acted in the past. What does that historic behavioral data look like? How many shows have they come to? What shows did they go to? When did they buy to that show? What price level did they buy? How many tickets did they buy? Who did they bring with them? You know, that all plays a really big role. And this is now me putting on my marketing hat for me trying to understand what the right type of message is for a certain group of individuals. Let's take UB40, who was here just a couple weeks ago, your show at Levitt Pavilion here in Denver. Two people that went to UB40 for the nostalgia reason. You know, they're a couple and in their 60s, and UB40 was like, I don't know, their first dance at their wedding, something like that. So they're going for an entirely different reason than two kids who are going because they just love reggae and this is, you know, part of their reggae history, whatever it might be, right? Totally different messages that you want to send those two individuals. There's totally different promotions you want to send those two individuals. There are totally different ways where you as a promoter can create incremental revenue from those two different individuals.
Dude, we're not allowed to sell these kids weed yet. That's not part of it. The show's in Colorado, but we're not licensed for that at Levitt.
You could send a promotion for a free glass of red wine for UB40 to the couple who, you know, are celebrating an anniversary or whatever it might be, or just that matters to them. That's something that incentivizes those individuals. What data is going to allow you to do is start to understand who your fans are and what motivates them. And at the end of the day, any of the analysis that you're doing, right, and this is, you can do tons of analysis. It can apply to pricing. It can apply to tour routing. It can apply to what type of venue you want to put in, what type of artist you want to put in that venue, and what time of year you want that artist because they're going to succeed around that time of year. All those things come down to three major results is what you're hoping for, right? Can I create more revenue? Can I save money, marketing efficiencies, operational efficiencies, or can I save time? And that's a really big one too, right? Because it turns out that data analysis and just dealing with data in general can be a really big time saver. It can also in itself inherently be a really big time suck.
Right, because you're hoping to have an algorithm that's doing that for you and obviously not doing that by hand.
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, you write the algorithm, but it takes a lot of time to collect the data, scrub it, and put it into a format where you can start to understand it, right?
Scrub it.
Scrubbing is basically preparing your data and putting it into a format that you can start to play with it and understand it and make charts and make comparisons and correlations from it.
So you're putting it into a format that you can actually analyze it correctly.
That's right. So sometimes I think purely in spreadsheets, sometimes I think in like data visualizations, but
you're in the matrix.
Yeah, right. The perfect scenario. You have a spreadsheet sent to you from a show that was at a Ticketmaster venue. It's Ticketmaster host data. That is a database in itself. That Excel spreadsheet is a database. You've got your first start. That's, you know, demographic and behavioral data. That's the low-hanging fruit for our industry, for music industry, that we should be collecting and analyzing. And even,
and it's amazing
even
too,
for artists,
because you get
right?
now in the Ticketmaster One system where you can go in and see in real time who's buying the tickets. Some people will tell you they don't care who's buying the tickets, but I do the same act in many markets, and I want to know who's buying the tickets so I can market to those people directly in other markets, which Ticketmaster's now allowed me without doing any work on my own.
And Ticketmaster is doing a great job at that. And I'm sure other ticketing companies are also doing a really amazing job with that. Here's a gap that I see, even in just your business model.
Please point out my flaws.
It's a gap, not a flaw. The gap is that even in Denver, because I live in Denver, so I understand the market. How many different ticketing providers are you working with in a year?
Well, we know in Denver, Ticketmaster is obviously our core. We know Ticketfly / now Eventbrite is here. Access is a major player in this market in particular. I know Brown Paper Bag does some of the independent clubs. Tickets.com is here. TicketWeb is part of Ticketmaster, but they do some of the clubs separately on their own. That's 7 before I've looked at a Westward to check out what is local.
That's 7, and I'm going to point out even an 8th for you that you might not even know about. It's now part of Access, but Access bought Veritix. And I'm not sure how they've merged entirely yet, but you might be getting a Veritix data set when you put on a show at the Pepsi Center or Dick's Sporting Goods Park. That might be Veritix data. You might be getting an Access spreadsheet from a show at Red Rocks. Right. So what I'm getting at here is that if you're capable of getting the ticketing data, the ticketing, feed from all of those different venues, then you are now stuck with 8 different variations of structured ticketing data. Each one of them are going to be slightly different from the other. So one of the challenges for somebody like you and for anybody who is promoting at multiple venues and doesn't have an exclusive ticketing provider for them, this is artists too. Artists are playing at various places all over the world. Is that now, if you're only looking at your Ticketmaster database, you only understand the shows that Scott Aller went to that was at a Ticketmaster venue. You don't know about all the other shows that I attended of yours at Veritix, at a Veritix building or an Access building or a Ticketfly building or a Brown Paper Bag building until you start to compare those and put those things together. So the challenge that people have, this is going to be the biggest challenge for the music industry, or maybe the people listening to this podcast, is how do I parse all that data together so that I get a single view of Scott Aller as an Emporium Presents customer, not a Scott Aller as a Pepsi Center customer, Scott Aller as a High Dive customer, Scott Aller as a DPAC customer, and Scott Aller as a Paramount customer. You don't want to see all those different views of me. You want to be able to see, how have I participated in your business over the past however many years? Maybe I even appear in some of your other markets. Maybe by understanding all the different shows and having one single view of what Scott Aller's been doing, you can now understand that he's a traveling person. He visits Nashville a lot. I shouldn't just be promoting Denver shows to him. He's in Nashville, 4 times a year. I should be sending him Nashville promotions. If I'm an artist, same thing goes, right? If I'm an artist, I really want to identify that 20% of people that make up 80% of my income, or, 80% of the engagement, I want to be able to identify who those really highly engaged VIPs are. David Marcus talked about this a little bit a couple weeks ago with the artist services that Ticketmaster does, right? You want to have different conversations with those types of people, because those types of people are willing to spend more money. They're evangelists. They're going to spread your name. If I'm a promoter, I want to have a much, much better understanding of what my crossover for different types of acts look like. I just want to have a better picture of who I can promote other unknown acts that this might be their first time in the market. You don't have a whole lot of data of who's going to show up, and you're taking stabs in the dark of, this person attended that other show 3 years ago and that act is similar to this act, so I hope that they would like this. But there's other key indicators that you're probably missing out on by not having a really good, solid view of all of your fans.
What are the first steps, and what level financially do I have to invest to actually get my feet wet? Data for dummies, if you will.
The best thing you can do for yourself, even on a zero budget, is prepare for someday having a budget, or someday knowing how to do this or running into somebody who's willing to do this for you. And that is, make the ask. Make the ask. If nothing else, try to get your hands on the data. Even if you don't know what to do with it, get it and put it in a folder, put it on an external hard drive, whatever you want to do, but get it, because it's all of the best insights are going to come from that historical information. So even if you're sitting on that for 5 years, if you were to all of a sudden have a budget and say, I'm going to hire somebody to be a strategy officer and an analyst inside of our company, we're going to be more data driven. And they walk in and they say, oh my God, you got 5 years worth of historical data that I can start to sort through. You've given them a giant head start. That's number one.
Okay, and I have that.
Good. That's amazing.
I just don't know what the fuck to do with it.
Okay, so let's say that you were going to hire somebody. What does a data analyst cost? You could find an analyst straight out of college, $50,000 to $100,000 range, who's got an MBA in data sciences. So that's a dedicated person. The really fun part about that, where it gets really expensive, is when you're trying to collect a lot of data. When you need software to automatically piece all of those different data sets together, you could go in there manually with your market, whoever is on your marketing staff right now could start taking all of those lists and identifying names of people who are the really high spenders and trying to see what other types of shows those really high spenders are attending. And
But if
how
they're doing
they can,
it by hand, they're bound to miss
yeah, that's
stuff.
the biggest problem, right? Like, you can do all of this with zero investment, because all data and analytics really is asking a question and then going and finding the data and proving a hypothesis one way or the other. If I'm just want to ask the question, who are my high propensity buyers for the 311 show? Well, then I'm going to sit there and start asking myself, what kind of behavioral data makes sense to look at that? And then it's, what kind of offers do I want to send those people? And that data is at your fingertips. You just have to spend the time to go look at it.
Do 1,000 shows this year. There's no way that it's cost effective for me to have somebody do that by hand. Obviously, there's an investment there. So we're paying someone $100,000, ask that has an MBA coming out of college, to run it. What's the software and hardware entry level stuff like going to run me realistically too?
I don't want to have a shameless plug for what my company is and what they do, but companies like us and what companies like Core Software do is create software that puts this information together for you and creates a single view of your fan. Deduplicates it, aggregates it all. This is what we're doing for sports teams, right? And that can run anywhere from $30,000, $40,000 investment a year all the way up to, $150,000 a year.
Okay, so we do need to hire the person, and then we can buy the system from you that would be customized for them to use.
That's right. You could also outsource that individual who's your analyst, right?
Roughly $30,000 up to $1 million plus if you really wanted to, but you could get your feet wet with a system for like $30,000 plus an employee for $100,000 a year to get started in doing this much better.
Yeah, I think that that's fair to say. If the people are good and the software is good, you're going to see results from it. Again, like I said, it sounds funny. You have to spend money to save money sometimes, which is what we're talking about here, right?
You got to build a better mousetrap, right? You got to buy the parts for that mousetrap to build it.
I think for the music industry, somebody like Madison Square Garden has to have something of like 15 to 20 million different names in their database. I don't know, right? But that's what we're talking about. And that's where you wind up spending a ton of money for something like a data warehouse. I don't think that there's a whole lot of need yet for that level of investment. Maybe a few players in the music industry, right? As far as promoters and managers and artists go, you don't need a full-on data warehouse, but you do need something to start collecting that data, putting it all in order, and getting it into shape where I can start to analyze it and ask the questions and then get answers from it.
Now, let me ask you this. Ticketmaster sends out that weekly email blast that I'm sure you get, I get. My personalized shows picked for me by Ticketmaster. Are you on this list?
Of course.
They're already doing it for me, right? Is there an advantage for me to spend the money and do it directly since they're already doing it separately?
Yeah, because first off, let's talk about that algorithm.
But that's kind of what you're talking about, right? I mean,
that
I'm
is so. It is. It's far more advanced than what I think we need to start off as a music industry as far as promoters and artists go at this point, right? This is the kind of analysis where they are collecting all of that behavioral data, website data. They're understanding how people browse. They're understanding where people fall off in the conversion funnel or in the shopping cart. And they're understanding how many times they come back before they actually buy a show. And then what they're doing is supplementing that data. So they're going off and supplementing what they're getting from behavioral data with Axiom credit card data. So now they have 240 other demographic, psychographic, behavioral data points, personics clusters that identify who these people are. Let me give you a really, really cool example of this. From my email from Ticketmaster, I used to get shows kind of all across the board, right? My typical inbox might be something about a Bruno Mars tour. It could even go all the way to like Bad Religion and punk rock. But then all of a sudden, come March, without me having done any other indicators really, but actually let's call it April, a little bit of a lag there, I get a promotion for a children's show. And it's because I had a daughter in March. And they know this because my credit card show that I'm purchasing so many damn diapers that only a new dad would possibly be spending that amount. And so that goes into the algorithm, and they know I should start promoting other types of shows that have other types of behavioral interests for Scott Aller to him. So he might not have ever bought Disney on Ice before, but now we know he has a 3-year-old. We know what he drives, the type of car he has. We know what his discretionary income is. So not only am I going to promote Disney on Ice to him because of his kids, I'm also going to promote the best possible tickets to him because that's what he's interested in. He's not interested in the bargain buy. He's interested in the VIP buy. Offer him something really nice with a really high margin for Ticketmaster and the promoter and the show and whatever, right? That's a very, very highly advanced. And yes, that costs a lot of money. It doesn't have to cost you anything to start looking for the data and considering the data in all of your other moves going forward. It's one of those things where, yes, you have to crawl before you walk. You have to walk before you run. You're talking about running. You don't have to have that level of investment. You just have to be curious.
I realize that there's a different world where you can dabble in this as you're getting your feet under it and figure it out, spending more and more as you're learning. But it seems like with data, it's a much more expensive curve to do it right.
Data and analytics starts out first as a mindset, right? It's just a mindset of saying that we understand and know that there are nuggets of information that live in past ticketing data. Ticketing data, I'm saying that just because it's what's really easy for you to get your hands on, right? In the sports world, they add in ticketing data, social data, food and beverage data, parking data, merchandise.
I mean, this isn't just the sports teams, though, right? Airlines do it too. Hotels do it. It's in all the different hospitality industries.
It's in any industry where there's a one-on-one customer relationship. It's all about trying to provide a higher value to your fans also. It's not always about money. It's about, for the sports teams, it's about loyalty. By making them more loyal and enjoying the customer experience and wanting to come back, that translates to more revenue for the team. But at the end of the day, they're not tweaking pricing models in order to get more money out of them. It's more comprehensive than that. It's about the relationship. It's about how do we make sure that every time Scott Aller goes to a Emporium show, he's going to have a really, really great time. And he knows that even if he doesn't know the act, Emporium Presents brings somebody to the town, it's going to be worth it to go see. Or for Red Rocks has that reputation. It's such a beautiful venue. It doesn't matter who you go see. You're at Red Rocks, right? If you're starting at the most fundamental piece, it's just knowing and appreciating the fact that data has insights buried within it. You don't necessarily have to go out and buy the software. You can go find a consultant even. You don't even have to find a full-time employee to do this for you. There are companies that do one-on-one engagement and will go through your data with you no matter what state it's in. They'll sit down with you and say, here's what we think we can do with the data we have. Here's what we think you could do going forward. And let's see how that works, right? And that's another really good way to get your feet wet in data and analytics.
What's the next step in that progression that anyone could do as they're getting into this?
Figure out what your budget is. If your budget's zero, then get really curious and you start diving into it yourself. If your budget is $30,000 to $100,000, find a consultant to sit down with you and talk you through it. If your budget is more than that, or you've already decided, look, we want to do data and we're going to do data right, speak with a couple of companies that provide data analytics software and speak with a couple of people that would be interested in doing that for you full time.
That's something you guys can provide as a company at Core, right?
At Core, we provide the software. And we also provide those consulting services.
I want to thank you so much for explaining and dumbing it down for me.
It wasn't entirely dumbed down. It's one of those things that, especially with new industries, and especially we're a creative industry in the music industry, right? There's not a ton of people who are sitting down every day thinking about the analytical side of what our business is because it's generally an evocative business. So
technically, if a kid was smart enough that high school kid could take the data of all the girls in his school, crunch the data to figure out who would say yes to him to go to prom.
Yeah, I mean, you basically just described Facebook, right? I mean, the way that Facebook started off was just trying to figure out
Mark
who was
trying
single.
to get laid.
Yeah, he was just trying to figure out who was single inside of his school. That was all it started out as. I agree with that comment entirely, right?
I mean, it's a young man's thing, and obviously that was pretty simplistic, but it's possible, right?
Of course. I mean, that's the cool thing is that data and analytics are one of those industries where if you were entering school now and looking for something to study, that would apply to every possible industry you could think of. I'm sure there is one, but I can't think off the top of my head of an industry that couldn't benefit from data analysis. It's proven to be very useful. And, I should give that caveat that whatever you glean from data isn't necessarily the end all be all. Data is providing you a platform to start checking what you might instinctually already know, or surprising things that go against what your instincts say. Data is best used as a testing and feedback system also, right? You always do what's called a gut check, and then you test your hypothesis, and then you tweak it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it works a little bit, but you think if you made a couple of extra tweaks to your analysis, it might work significantly better. That's the kind of algorithm approach that Google search uses. It's constantly evolving. You can't ever beat a Google search for SEO rankings simply because they're constantly evolving. What attributes indicate search intent? They're always trying to figure out if somebody types these 4 words in, what's the intent of their search versus let's show them a bunch of web pages where those words occur in it. That's kind of similar to Ticketmaster's emails. I don't want people to come out of this thinking that, Scott Aller said that he can solve all my financial problems with data analysis. That's not how it works. It's an ongoing development of understanding your business, understanding your audiences, and learning from that, and being at least able to sit there and say, yes, this worked. No, it didn't. Here's what we learned from it. Here's how we're going to continue to improve.
You constantly tweak it and get it better just as technology does itself.
Exactly.
Scott, I want to thank you so much for taking the time and talking to us.
Yeah,
and
of course.
I think you spoke about yourself more in third person than anyone has on the podcast since we started. So I want to thank you for that as well.
Yeah, you got it.
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah.
Data is everything in the new age of the business. Scott surely is driving how to maximize that right now, and he's just an impressive fellow.
Hi, my name's Toby Leighton-Pope. I work for AG Presents in the UK, and I'm on Promoter 101.
We posted this graphic up on socials a couple days ago, but we thought it'd be great for y'all to hear in the podcast. Over the past year, we have had a ton of episodes, but here are the top 10 most played for the calendar year 2017.
Coming in at number 10, episode number 47, Mac Presents Marcy Allen with Paradigm's Kevin French.
And number 9, it was episode 26 with X-Ray's Steve Strange and Paradigm's, now Contra Inc.'s Brandon Frankel.
Number 8, episode number 62, Ticketmaster's Jared Smith.
And number 7, it's episode 22. It's Ticketfly's Andrew Dreskin and ICM Partners Andrea Johnson.
Number 6, episode 43, United Talent Agency's J-Bo Lewis and Embrace's Stephen Riff.
And coming in at number 5, that's episode 36. We got CAA's Mitch Rose and Live Nation's Paula Palazzo.
Number 4, episode 44, Bowery Presents Jim Glancy and ICM Partners Megan White.
Number 3, that's episode 21. That was Paradigm's Tom Windish and Atlantic Records Harlan Fry.
And number 2, it's episode 18 with William Morris Endeavor's Mark Geiger with tour managers Jim Runge and David Klein.
And finally, number 1, this is the most played Promoter 101 episode of the calendar year 2017. That goes to the honors of episode 41. That featured an interview with Ticketmaster's David Marcus.
An amazing list of podcasts. They're all still available at promoter101.net. And just to note, some of the episodes, of course, were released later in the years than others. So for Jared Smith, who made it all the way up to number 8 of the most played for the year while only being released a handful of weeks ago, they're not weighted. So that's pretty impressive.
It really is. And we want to thank everybody that tuned in and listened to Promoter 101 in 2017. We're excited what's in store for 2018. We hope you'll keep listening.
Booinkle J. Moose on Promoter 101. Now here's something you'll really like. If you want to reach out to us, you can always send us an email or smoke signals or tweet at us or hit us on Facebook through Messenger or call the offices or whisper at us at a conference or flip us off across the bar at Faces and Names next week. But usually the simplest way is Steiny at promoter101.net.
And we're going to be back here next week, same Promoter 101 time, same Promoter 101 place, and we got interviews from CID's Entertainment's Dan Berkowitz, Circle Talent's JJ Cassieri, and R&B concert promoter Gino Shelton.
But until then, we're wishing you sold-out shows for the weeks to come. Cheers.
Hi, my name's Ed Bicknell, and I'm Promoter 101, and I'm in room 24-something, and I've got an inside leg measurement of 32 inches and a cup size of 31A.
Ba-da-ba-ba.